We'll start the last session for today. This session is on legal and institutional environments to support rights to quality education for girls and young women. As I mentioned yesterday, one of the areas in which the African Union International Center for Girls and Education is working on legal frameworks or legal instruments. We know that in many of our countries, we have legal frameworks for access for girls' education and women and young women's education. And unfortunately, many of those laws, frameworks, policies, instruments are not reinforced in our member states, unfortunately. And this is where we have Dr. Ruth, whom we have invited. Dr. Ruth Ora Odiambo, who has been working with us for the past couple of months, who has developed a framework for monitoring the implementation of existing legal instruments and policies on the rights of girls and young women to access education. So she will be just briefly telling us what is the difference between binding documents and non-binding documents. She will be just taking us through also some of the legal instruments which exist in Africa and how they relate to access of girls' education or education per se. And what is going to be your role as member states? How do you make sure that you implement those and that those policies or instruments are reinforced in your own member states? So Dr. Ruth, thank you for coming, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very bleak afternoon, the way I'm seeing your faces, but just try to be brightened a bit. I know you've had heavy lunch, but work has to be done, so we get something from this last session. I will try to summarize and make it a little short. Now, as Dr. Rita has already informed you, they've been taking a research on international and regional instruments that relate to girls and women's education. In some of them, they highlight the fundamental rights for both men and women to access education. And not just accessing education, but quality education for all. And this is not starting with this conference. The urge to get girls and women to have quality education began many years in the 1960s when UNESCO came up with an instrument called Convention Against Elimination of Discrimination. Convention on eliminating discrimination in education. That is in the way back in 1960. And then we come to the 90s, the impetus was given by the Jomtien Declaration, which is a declaration that the world came up with in the 1990s to strengthen the initiatives that were begun in the 1960s, but were not fulfilling or bearing any fruit. So much more needed to be done. And even then, Africa has not been left behind. We have education for all, the Dakar Declaration, we have the Ouagadougou Declaration, all these focused on ensuring that the gender discrimination in education is eliminated and we get a better future for girls and women. So much has been talked about the importance of education for girls. I will not emphasize that, so I'll simply go to the instruments. Sorry. It's not working. I've already explained these three triangles, what the impedance that gave the motivation or the strength that it's propelling both the world and Africa as a region to emphasis on girls' education. So at a glance, those are the regional and international instruments. They're very important for us. And why are they important? You see, if you do not have a framework, how can you be held accountable? There has to be something which is specifically provided for you to be following, so that if you don't follow, then you can be held accountable. Or you don't have an excuse to say that we were not aware, or we do not know what is happening. So you have the instruments. Most countries have ratified them. Some are in the process of ratification, because there are some few countries in Africa that have not ratified some of these instruments, but they are making a milestone. And the question we should be asking, if they have not even ratified, how come they're able to still implement the provisions of those international instruments? So the key ones are here: Universal Declaration of Human Rights that affirms the universality of rights, which includes also education, the inalienability and the divisibility of rights. So rights are for all of us. It's not for men, it's not for women. So long as we form the human family, then all these rights flow to us as individuals without discrimination. And then the Convention Against Discrimination in Education, this is the one I told you, an initiative of UNESCO, which began in 1960, but you can see 2017, we are still struggling with the implementation of the nitty-gritties that are provided in that convention. Then we have the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We put emphasis on the education of the child. Many other rights, but education is also key. Then we have Convention on the Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women, which is very specific to women. It takes acknowledgement of the fact that women's rights have been relegated to the periphery, so they needed a much more nuanced international instrument to deal with issues of women. And this particular one is important because it also has a provision for a monitoring body that checks or takes stock of what member states are doing to implement, or the challenges they're meeting in implementation. The same as the Convention of the Rights of the Child, it has a monitoring body that monitors implementation across the world. Then at the African regional level, you have the African Charter, commonly known as the Banjul Charter. This is good, but it has only one provision about women, and it's not so pronounced on how girls and women the education is supposed to be promoted. And that's why in 2003, the African Union came up with a specific instrument which is almost similar to CEDAW, to promote women's rights in education and many other aspects. Then we have the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. It is almost similar to this one for the UN. And then the African Youth Charter, the only charter that is widely recognized. It is Africans that first came with this charter for their youth to be able to tap on their talent, because we know a country cannot grow, a continent cannot grow unless you invest in the youth. And that's why I'm so happy that at least there's a theme for tapping or investing in the youth to reap dividends for the continent. And then also on the right side, marriage is usually a challenge to education for girls and women, because for us, sometimes we see marriage as the ultimate. So it is rather you can sacrifice your education and you get married, because there's more that marriage offers. And because of cultural issues, globally, they found it necessary to come up with a convention that specifically addresses issues of the minimum age for marriage, so that you don't tap away the potentials for young girls and marry them on, but at least wait until they're 18, they have grown a bit, they have some basic education that can help them function. And then we have the international economic on social and cultural rights. This more it deals with issues of economic and social and cultural issues in nature. As much as they say we should promote our cultures, but they say let us only promote those that are positive. And it also looks at economic empowerment, which is associated with both education and health for both girls and women. And then we have the Beijing Platform for Action. You know this one, it was the first major, the last one after Copenhagen, 1995, that really drummed support for women's empowerment. And education was one of the key things. Then we have the World Declaration on Education for All. And this one came much later because they were seeing the 1916 instrument by UNESCO was not working. So they needed to come up with something else. Then on the other side, we have the regional instruments, Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality. You have the African Gender Policy, the Nairobi Declaration on the Women's Decade, the 2030 AU Agenda, and then, of course, the Ouagadougou, which I'd already said, declaration. Now, the importance of all this, they have similar provisions, and I do not want to bore you. All you need to know is that all these instruments, routes for promotion of girls and women education. They take cognizance of the fact that there are challenges in terms of promoting girls' education based on limited resources, based on cultural issues, based on religious issues, and so they drum support that if we are to believe that human rights are universal, then even girls and women have the same rights as our brothers, as our fathers. So all we need to do is to appreciate that we are all human beings and all those rights that are guaranteed in this instrument are supposed to be applied to all of us for the benefit of our development and for the benefit of the development of the whole world and our respective nations where we live. Now, in this instrument, which I have already, some of them are treaties, some of them are declarations. When it comes to treaties, they are binding, meaning if a country, when I'll try to explain what a signature is, ratification is, you'll understand. Once a country has put a signature and ratified a treaty, they become bound by the provisions and they can be held accountable for failure to implement. They also have a duty to report on the progress that they are making or the challenges that they are encountering implementation, and more so, explain why they are not able to implement. So that every time they report, whether it is 4 years, 2 years, or when the report is needed by the respective committee, you have no excuse. You cannot give, there was no money in 2017. 2025, the same reason, you know? This helps the monitoring bodies to keep check on the countries, and also it makes countries to get ashamed that you can't be using one excuse all the time. You have to at least look for something else, and it puts pressure on you to implement. So it is important that the treaties that your country has ratified to be implemented, because it is not good to present a good image internationally, but when you come home, it becomes business as usual. Now, declarations, as much as they're good at international level, countries are never particularly held accountable on declarations because they are treated as if it's like gentlemen, ladies agreement, you know? So you cannot hold them accountable. You leave it at the goodwill of the government to implement. So for those of us who are present and your countries, you are aware, have ratified these instruments. Please try and ensure that they ratify. And when they ratify, tell them to reduce the provisions of those treaties for the benefit of the citizens. Those who have not ratified, please persuade your countries to ratify them so that women and girls can benefit from their provisions. Now, international instruments become law in your countries once in the following manner. I'll also try to be quick. When they put a signature, that is when at a general level, But when you want them to be accountable, they go through this process of ratification or accession, which means a country has to come with a legal instrument. We call them ratification instruments or instruments of ratification. So you come back to your country through your Attorney General and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you will sign a document which you will take to the relevant body. For the African Union, for the African instrument, you will take it to the African Commission and you deposit it with the chairperson. It is kept within the legal department. For the UN, you'll take it to the Secretary General, to signify that it is very good and you've committed, you're going to ensure you implement at national level. Because there's no point of just signing symbolically, but then you come home and you do nothing. And then this is what is important, because it's now at that level when you're domesticating. You're localizing that from the international big thing now to make your people understand and tell them, this is what the global world is moving towards. We need to move at the same pace. Then, of course, implementation, then now the little things that you're doing, domestication simply means you're localizing that law. Then implementation means you're putting infrastructure within your country now to do the implementation. And if there is any violation, then you can enforce through either legal measures or other measures to ensure that the right thing is done. Now, many countries are represented here, and I'm sure you're doing something in your respective states to implement the instruments that I have highlighted. So I will not be able to say everything that all the member states have done. But Dr. Rita, in the course of doing this research, they sampled many African countries. There's Egypt, there's Kenya, there's Mauritius. They have done a lot of work within their respective states to implement this international instrument at national level, either through their constitutions, through their laws, local laws, or through policies and programs. And if you'll allow me, I can skip, because this is part of what you'll be highlighting here. Those are the many countries that Dr. Rita sampled, and I will skip them. So what we need to focus more is on the challenges, because it is where the problem lies. And those who are in the education sector present here are well versed with some of these challenges. And if you want education for girls and women to count, then you have to listen to the challenges keenly and tell us the effective role you're going to play henceforth to make this right a reality for girls and women. Mauritius talked about 50-50 for girls and women and boys and men in the manufacturing sector. But you see, there's still a challenge, because she said they're more at the bottom. At the apex, the pyramid is still sharp. I don't think I don't think they've reached a level where even at the apex, you even have one lady or two ladies. It is still male-dominated. And that cannot change until we start from the base, growing them from the basics, so they can move to that level where they're at the apex. Because sometimes I always say it will reach a time that even men will look for affirmative action once we grow. So we need to support the women to be where you are, and it's not a fight. It is just advocacy. Advocacy that we are focusing on both girls and women, boys and men, because we all form the whole family unit. If you want your family to grow, you must ensure the growth of every other person with this family unit. Then once you start that from the family, it is easier to translate that to community, to the wider society, to the nation, and to the world at large. So some of the challenges that we get here are these ones. there's usually a problem with domestication of the treaties. And the problem lies with the political commitment at the top. Some of the political things are beyond our reach, but I'm saying there's nothing which is beyond our reach when we have a goal. If you want to persuade your country to have that political commitment, we can have it. The house is the problem, but it is possible. How are these other countries able to overcome the political commitment? They are doing it. What is making them different? If the commitment is there, if the will is there politically, they will start from the top, and in fact, if the top is always asking questions, even to the lowest people, it becomes easy for the lowest person to implement, because they're saying the person at the top is accountable and is always ready and asking questions, why have you not done it? You know? So if we set good examples at the top, it will be easy to be picked from the down part. How has Rwanda done it? How is Mauritius doing? How is Botswana doing? Because she told me they're even being audited, you know? Every 3 months, they have to file a report. If you do not, you become answerable. So if you know your job is on the line, you'll always try to do the best that you can. So let us learn from each other. Let us speak to each other. Let us listen. Let us learn from ourselves. Then also the dualist approach, which is usually a problem in most African countries. You have constitutions which pose challenges. They say that no law, whether it's international law, if there's any provision that contradicts that constitution, then it becomes a problem. They say the constitution will take the day, but this constitution is the one that is constraining the rights for the women, rights for the girls, because some of them have cultural connotations. They allow discrimination on personal law, issues of culture, issues of marriage. Why? Because there's a constituency within this country that has to be understood, and you have to allow them to practice their culture. So if you put it in the constitution, then you get some kind of loyalty from this community, because you know every 5 years or every 4 years there is an election. So if you're offending any particular community, then you're on the line. Your job is on the line. You may not be re-elected. So we allow some of those things in our constitutions. So if you have this dual approach, you're saying, yes, we'll sign, but as long as we've not domesticated, or as long as our constitution says any other law is inferior if it is in conflict with our own constitution, then it becomes a problem. You know, if I find a solution in a superior instrument from the international instrument or the regional instrument, why can't my country allow me to use it? And because the way the laws are, and the courts have to interpret the law as they're given, unless you find a court that is very active and wants to interpret the national law to give effect to the international law, it becomes difficult. Because remember, the judges are also appointed by that authority. So this presents problems. And then, of course, this one is self-explanatory, lack of clear constitutional provisions. And this is, you find this in many African member states. So I'll not give examples, but if you read your constitutions, you'll find those ones. And then under development, okay, we said that Africa is poor, but are we really poor? We are the richest. If you look at the minerals, you look at the cotton that she talked about, they're all found in Africa, you know, but they're taken somewhere else for processing. Then we get the last product. How can we, as a country, or as a continent, ensure we do away with this poverty and illiteracy? And if Africa is illiterate, then figure out the levels of literacy for women. Where would women be at that level? Look at the level of poverty. Where will women be at that level? Because they're the poorest in paid. They also have the lowest education. So, and we are talking about a world that we are all equal in all spheres. Where is that equality? We have to start with education for women to get to that level. And then, of course, scarcity of materials needed to advance women. When I talk of materials, it's broad-based. It is about resources in terms of finances, resources in terms of personnel, and many other things. When the education is costly, in most instances, you'll find the girl's education is sacrificed. Why? Because she's going to benefit another family, so it is not important. We focus more on the boys. So even then also, when you want things done for women and girls in many countries, you'll find the resources that are allocated to that particular program is very limiting, you know? Once you're limited in resources, how then do you move forward? How do you promote the girls' education? So as member states present here, you must ensure that your country puts sufficient budgetary allocation to promote programs, activities for the girls and women's education. Not just symbolically to say that now there's a school there, you know, because in some countries, even more states have said, they say, now we put a woman as the defense. Are you happy? It is not about happiness. It's about developing the individual girl, the individual woman to make a difference in the life of your economy, in the life of your political life, and as well as the social life. Because they're able to negotiate their spaces once they have this education. You know, they can fly planes, they can repair planes. There's even one in my country that is one of the, is trained is not industry, but I think it's in the sea industry. She's the first one, but there's at least progress somewhere, you know, and many other various examples in other countries. Then, of course, we have this problem of political instability, either occasioned by, there's very little in terms of countries crossing and fighting with each other, you know, but it's more of civil war. Or maybe some other countries have a hand in the way some instability are present in the member states, you know, in the neighboring member states. But within the instability, whether civil or just very minor, education is greatly affected because you'll find people can't go to school because of insecurity, and particularly women and girls are taken away by the soldiers to prove something to the other side, you know. Everyone is taken hostage. But the one who is most disadvantaged is the woman. They can't even go to school even when it remains a bit normal because they're afraid someone will be in the bush trying to waylay them. So how do we deal with issues of insecurity in Africa, in our countries, in our respective countries, to promote the girls' education? And even during those instability, how can we ensure that it does not interrupt the normal studies in the schools? Can we barricade the schools? Can we offer more protection for girls and women during instability? And this one is a big problem, dictatorship in African countries. So the ruler becomes the word, the law, and everything. Does not allow room for democracy, and there's a lot of violation for human rights. So if there's violation of human rights, broader human rights, how can the rights in education be realized, you know? Western democracies, they always see Africa as a sick continent, as a continent that is always supposed to be, always needy of help. So we need to change also this perception about Western democracies that perceive Africa as the other. So anything bad is always associated with Africa. Anything good is associated with the Western. We need to change our thinking, and the thinking has to come from us as Africans. We need to rethink, or we need to deconstruct how we think and find a new way of thinking that appreciates Africa in its own context, in its own content, and do what your circumstances can allow you to learn from. You do not have to copy them, but you can borrow what you think is relevant. And of course, the cultural things, I've already explained this one. I will not go. Our level of consciousness is very low. And when we are faced with conflict or competing interests between culture and modernity, or culture and what our male colleagues want or what the government wants, they'll always go for that cultural thing that affects women. Notwithstanding, it is going to affect their economic development, socioeconomic development as individuals, and then as part of the segment of the society. How do we learn to do away with cultures that disempower women? How then do we do away with the negative culture, which is not necessarily fighting that culture because you're going to have a backlash, you know? Where is the alternative when they stop this cultural thing? Can you provide an alternative that is worth dealing with? And many others. So now I didn't want to also, I'm not going to go through this. You already had some success stories, so I can skip. And Dr. Rita will share with you the bigger report. And what I want us to concentrate more, and I'll also share with you these ones. You're already happening. I mean, you're already doing something. So our African, what recommendations can we give to Africa as a continent to be able to ensure that girls' and women's education is realized, not only in quantity, but in quality? Because in quantity, we don't want just mere numbers. There are so many women. So what? I want a woman who will tell me, yes, I have this education, and this is what I'm doing to improve my life. This is what I'm doing to improve my society. I'm doing to improve my family. And the continent. Do you just want me to be sitting in the corner of Kenya and I do not know what is happening in Mauritius? I'm not able to engage and learn from the experiences? No. We want a full-round woman who can go to Mauritius and speak her mind, positive mind that contributes to development. She can go to the US, she can go to France and speak with authority, you know? Not a timid person, because education removes timidity. You don't have to agree, even if you disagree, but that is the truth. And that's why there is a resistance to educate the women and girls, because they'll be challenging the status quo, you know? And people are better off in the parochial status, but we must change the language. How we deliver the message is the most important, so that we don't offend our brothers or our fathers thinking we are fighting with them, but we're saying we want a level playing field for all of us to get opportunity to make a difference for all of us. And then this can only be done on building these systemic changes. Slowly, it cannot be instant, because you see it has cultural connotations, religious connotations, political connotations, economic connotations. So you have to build slowly but sure. And then strategic partnerships. We know government maybe does not have so much money, you know, and it cannot do this alone. So we need support even from the Western world, but only when it fits our situation. You do not have to get that outfit that fits all, because it can never fit all. You know, you have different circumstances. Even countries are not the same. Levels of implementation cannot be the same, because you have different circumstances. The environment in which you live is also different. So you can only take what works. And then there's a problem of data collection and analysis. If you really want to solve a problem, you must have hard evidence. You know, she talked about policy decisions. You cannot make decisions unless you have proper data that support that fact. You know, you have statistics that show this is really a problem, so that then you can get the policymakers to start thinking, yes, this is a problem. So what is the direction we're going to take to help us alleviate or eliminate this problem altogether? And then holding states accountable. This I've already explained. These instruments create obligations for states to respect, to fulfill and protect rights of women and girls in education. So if you find a constitution that still allows marriage of underage girls, when it is very clear in all the international instruments, the age of majority is 18 years. So you'll be asking them, okay, you've ratified this, you've committed, you're going to implement, but how come in your national institution you have this provision? You're still allowing girls to get married at young age. You're not even rerouting your girls who have gotten pregnant back to school, yet the provisions, the international provisions allow them. Then in that case, then you can go to the committees or take your government to court, to make them answer for those failures, or what more that they can do better to improve. That's why accountability is so important, and it is important to know whether they have ratified this instrument and whether it is a treaty so that you can get them to account better. And then technical expertise and capacity building for AU member states. There are countries, like even for, it's not a must that all of us will understand human rights, And even if you're a lawyer, not all lawyers are trained on human rights, so they will not know. So if the lawyers don't know and the lay people do not know, you do not know, not all member states can know about human rights. So you need to build the capacity to be able not only to understand, but to appreciate, so that they can take action. And they do not see it as a problem, as an offensive attack on culture. And unless that appreciation is there or that acknowledgement is there of human rights, it will be very difficult for them to promote girls' and women's education. And then deeper commitment. I already talked about this. Where there's lack of political commitment or will, how can we inculcate this, so that they move with what is required of them or the obligations created under the treaties? Now, you see, if I am a girl and I don't know my rights, I'll just sit there and watch it being violated. But if you make me understand this is my right and this is what I can do when it is violated, I'll be very confident to stand and speak against it. And it is easier because once one girl knows, it will spread to the other girls, and you have a collective voice, not an individual voice, because an individual voice will get lost. But when it is collective, it is easy then to get people to listen. And you know about the whole story of Malala and how she was able to overcome a problem because she knew her right. Someone had built a capacity and she was able to, and she's become a beacon for hope for many girls. So we must build the capacity of these girls and women. This one I've already talked about budgeting sufficient resources. If you do not want to implement a program for girls and women's education, then you starve it of resources. But if there's commitment, it will be available in your ministry of education or the sector where you come from for education, or in TVET. What are you doing to ensure that there's sufficient resources to make you move around with the activities? And I think there are so many. Can I skip some of them so you can read them? Okay, and then of course, policy initiatives. I told you, let us not play politics with our lives or with education. If there are policies, let us make them meaningful for our people. You come up with a policy because you've already done assessment and you know the need of the people. So what is the point of having that policy on paper? It does not serve the purpose it was meant to serve. We can talk about legislation because legislation is very broad, but policy has the nitty-gritties of doing things. For heaven's sake, let us make policies which are anchored on principle and well calculated to serve the purpose. Not to present a symbolic meaning to the people. And then, of course, we know that in Africa, and like in many other countries, all countries in Africa, most resources are concentrated in urban areas. In the rural areas, they're sparsely, they're sparsely available. So it becomes difficult to access schools, and even it's also difficult to get many teachers who are going to those schools because they feel it is too remote and so not suitable for them. But if we believe in equity and equality, we should try and ensure that we spread resources across the country. And even if you're not able to spread because of constraints, financial constraints, can we find a solution which is community-based that is still supporting? Because I know there's a program in Burkina Faso where children are taught at the basic level in their local languages as the way to go to the formal schools. It still offers some little solution. And I think I can stop there, but one thing which I want you to do, and it is right there, is to say that, education is not just about girls getting into school. It is more to it. How they're going to transform their lives and the lives of the others. And going forward, let us begin to engage our governments to let them have the commitment required to implement, to ensure that girls' and women's education becomes a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruth. I know Dr. Ruth could have talked for 2 more hours. I've seen her talk, and she's so passionate about this. But I think she gave us a good highlight of some of the existing frameworks or policies or documents or legal instruments that exist in our continent. What are the challenges that exist out there, and what exactly do you think that you should be doing in your own member states to ensure that those different legal instruments that she mentioned are being implemented or reinforced in your country? As she mentioned, some of them are binding, some of them are not binding. That means you need to report on them. So maybe we would like to hear your views about the different legal and institutional instruments that exist in your own countries, in your own member states, and what have you done at your own member state level to ensure the implementation of those different or the ratification of those different instruments. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you. Yes, Cecil, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, to Dr. Ruth for a splendid and learning good session. I just would like to remind you of one thing that I also mentioned yesterday. One more declaration, the Declaration of Safe Schools. And we also need all member states on the African continent to sign up and endorse that declaration. Furthermore, you were mentioning that we could learn of each other, and I discussed today with some education people here in Mauritius whether there is a law so that the kids have to go to school by law. In Norway, for many, many years, we have had a right to go to school, but also a plight. It's actually forbidden not to send your children to the school. And perhaps that is why we also have a good public school and, of course, a high attendance. Thank you very much.
Nicola?
I would like to add on the presentation one thing, perhaps, but it's about, government, Ministry of Education, to also have the modesty to recognize the weaknesses of the institutional mechanism put in place since 2000 with the Dakar Framework for Action, to support progress towards gender equity and equality. We have some experience in the West and Central Africa region with a dedicated tool that supported that kind of assessment of institutional bottlenecks, implied by the response set up by government in 8 countries. And there is a clear lack of, governance, responsibilities, budget, so that at the end, people in the field who are supposed to support girls' education intervention, they have no clear accountability, no clear budget, so that they will go to the first NGO or local donors that give the maximum amount of money, and then perhaps implementing action that are not definitely linked to the education sector policy. So just, to mention that. There is a guidance not available in French and soon in English on that.
Okay, there's someone there. I think those are more of comments, and you're going to integrate them, like on the safe schools, and the one about clear, a lack of clear accountability and even non-responsiveness of government. That is a problem which is a problem in almost all countries. But I would like to get a copy of that. Can make it available? Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yes, Mash.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you, Dr. Ruth, for the presentation, which is very clear and very important, because legal instruments are the platforms that can enable us to collectively achieve our objectives together. But when I listened to you, I thought there was a need to ensure that all these instruments are discussed within the framework of the Agenda 2063, which I don't think you have listed as one of the documents we need, or one of the strategies we need to domesticate within our continent, because the agenda will assist us to move together as a continent and assist one another to address these things. The agenda is very clear on girls and women. It's very clear in all the instruments that you have mentioned there. And therefore, I feel if we are going to construct a case for girls and women, it will be very strategic for us to move within the umbrella Agenda 2063, since this is what we are all focusing on now, currently on the continent. Having said that, I'm also interested from a learning point of view. You have mentioned things like treaties and declarations, there are conventions, there are resolutions. How are these, the treaties, I know they need to be ratified and deposited, but when I look at a declaration, a convention, and a resolution, how does it really bind the countries to benefit the targeted the population that we will be looking at? Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Agenda 2063 for the AU is there, aspiration number 6. Only that I think maybe it's not there, but it is in the big document that was sampled in the research document. We'll share with you. Then on the issue of treaties, the difference between a treaty, declaration, or protocol, maybe one thing I need to make clear that a treaty is a binding document that a country signs, and it has a cohesive nature in terms of enforcement. For instance, it's law between, it's like law between many nations. It can be 2, 3, 4, 20, 185, but it is law. So it has the equal force of law and must be enforced. The only difference, therefore, that because it is a treaty and we have a problem of issues of sovereignty of states, it can be an international instrument, but because the state has sovereignty, when they violate, there's little that you can do because they do not have mechanisms for enforcement. For instance, in my law, in many of your institutions, if your country fails to implement something, you can cite them for contempt, you can do so many things, you know, to make them accountable. At international level, it's very little. You can come up with, you can say, yes, Kenya has violated or Mauritius has violated, but that is all. You only make a pronouncement, but there's no punishment for non-failure to comply. So it becomes a problem. Now, declarations is not law as such. It is just like a statement, you know, that many countries can be two, many or 100, more than two, you know, but it's a statement that reflects the aspiration of what people want to be done. But it has not reached the level of a treaty now where you can say they are forced to account when they do not, they are supposed to account for the provision that they have, the treaty that they have ratified. And then in treaties, you always have a body, most of them will have a body that monitors implementation of what a country is doing, where they're not doing it, or the challenges they are facing, and how they are going to overcome those challenges in the next reporting time. Declarations would not necessarily have them. But now protocols, it means that there is already an existing instrument that is solving a problem, be it economic, be it political. Like for this particular one, we'll talk about the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. We have a protocol, which is now on the women's rights. A protocol is like an international law that is only trying to beef up or to provide for a lacuna that was not anticipated or was not catered for fully in the existing instrument. So you're bringing another one, you know, that is only improving what is already existing. So now that is a protocol, but it has the equal force of the law as a treaty, unlike a declaration. So I hope that is now clear. Convention. Okay, convention is almost a synonym to a treaty. Almost the same, have the same force. Binding, is it binding? And they're binding. Declarations are not binding, but a protocol, treaty, convention are binding once. For some countries, once they sign, it is automatic, it becomes binding. For other countries, they have to ratify. That I was trying to make those distinctions of the four: signature, ratification, and domestication, for you to understand at what levels they come operative.
Yes, Dr. George.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Ruth has made a very brilliant presentation, but that has actually opened in my mind a Pandora box of issues that will have to be solved. It's talked about legal issues, financial issues, cultural, political, institutional, developing expertise, empowering girls. So I ask myself, where do I start?
Now, that is the question we should be asking ourselves and finding solutions in this forum this afternoon. Because without answering that question, the right for girls and women education will not be a reality. And it starts with us from this room, then we can spread it across to our governments. So Dr. George, back to you.
Yeah, I think what would be interesting, Dr. Ruth, is to give us like a success story, maybe a success story, I will let you choose. Maybe I was thinking of a Francophone country, maybe Burkina Faso. That would be interesting to see how Burkina Faso has ratified and implemented some legal instrument.
Now, Burkina Faso has a program on girls, girls and women. Now, one of the programs which they have is, I find it very interesting because they have a program for girls. Like I told you, in urban areas, most facilities are concentrated. But in the rural areas, the distance between homes and school is quite far, And because of insecurity, girls maybe are afraid they'll be waylaid or issues of defilement. So parents are afraid to take their children to school. So what Burkina Faso has done is that they have programs that get girls to learn within their location where they are, and they're even using the local dialect to teach, to get basic education. Then from there on, they move to another level. And that has increased the number of girls going to school. And then besides, there is a program which is run by FAWE that is helping them. There's a lot of presence of FAWE in Burkina Faso. I think Dr. Rita will expound on that. And then besides that, they have these policies for integrating girls back to school when they get pregnant. And I think some countries, and it was unfortunate because last month I was so appalled by a statement from a head of state, one of the member states, who said that once a girl has gotten pregnant in school, they should not be reintegrated because it is bad manners. But then the question you pose, what about the boy or the man responsible? Are they going to be stopped from going to work or going to school? You see, when you try to put roadblocks, you only affect the lady. And you encourage that circle of vicious poverty and underdevelopment for the girl. And it's going to take away all the gains that we've made in the 21st century. When it began in the 16th century, sincerely. We need to change something. And then also there are feeding programs in the Burkina Faso schools that is helpful. Just in the same way, I think Botswana says they cater for all the facilities for girls that they take in their vocational programs. And there are many other, also in their constitution for Burkina Faso, they have outlawed discrimination on the basis of culture. They have gender policies that root, and even gender in education policy that roots for education for the girls. Some other countries, there are many good examples also from even Egypt, because they come from conflict. The education program didn't stop because of conflict. They tried to put mechanisms to ensure that even within the instability, education was not interrupted. And they have special programs that encourage girls to do science subjects. And that program, which is run by Egypt, has been also borrowed by the Libyans along that area where they have conflict. It's being replicated and it is helping. So we should not use instability as an excuse to stop our education system, and particularly for women who are most affected. I'm not saying that men are not affected. Yes, they are affected. But women are more disproportionately affected by the conflict. And in other countries like Kenya, Botswana, there's affirmative action. Even in Ethiopia, there's affirmative action. They'll admit girls with lower points at university level, and also in science courses at the university. They will lower by 2 marks So if you're just going to miss with 2 marks, then the girls will be given a priority. And that is not discrimination. It could be, yes, discrimination, but it's positive because we're trying to create a balance, a level playing field for the girls to compete effectively with the boys. And then there's also a program for empowerment which is run by USAID in many other countries also, like about 4 countries. There's one in Kenya. There's also one in Ethiopia, where they empower the young girls. Even in South Africa, it's not run by USAID, but South Africa has a program where they have a forum for girls to speak freely, you know. They talk to them about sex education, so they are able to cope with these challenges in school. And they don't feel like they're stigmatized. And then they teach them to, they let them know that boys and girls can do the same thing once given opportunity. And the boys are also taught to respect the girls' rights and treat them with respect that they deserve. So as they grow when they are young, they already start at a level where each one of them see themselves as partners, and they deserve respect and dignity from each other and support the education in whatever level.
I want to ask Dr. Ruth a question. I want to talk about the accountability. We know that most of our member states have either signed, ratified, or domesticated some global instruments that she mentioned. I'm just going to mention them again. For example, the Convention Against Discrimination in Education, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention of the Rights of the Child, the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Consent of Marriage, minimum age for marriage and registration of marriage. I mean, we know that most of our member states have done so, either ratified, signed, agreed. Now, what is the accountability that we have as member states or as ministries towards the non-implementation of the ratification of these global instruments? And those global instruments that I just mentioned, I first of all would like to know, like, do you know about them? Is this the first time that you're hearing about them? How do you report as member states because these are all conventions, legal instruments pertaining to education, pertaining to access of education, pertaining to the girl, pertaining to the young woman. How do you report? What is your channel of communication? I know this is all very new, so you're finding it maybe a bit difficult, a bit strange, but these are all legal instruments which our higher authorities have signed, and we're supposed to be working with them. So, you know, here would like to look at the reporting system. The reporting system leads us to the accountability. So maybe I'd like, I don't know if Dr. Ruth wants to answer first, or if we can have any member state or anybody else like answer this.
Okay, I'll give you an example. I'll start from our own continent, African Union. You know, under those who have ratified the Maputo Protocol, you are expected to report. Okay, Maputo Protocol is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa. Now, this protocol, it does not have a body for monitoring, but under the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, paragraph 12 and 13, has a provision that requires all African governments to make yearly reports on how they're implementing the declaration as well as the Maputo Protocol on issues to do with women. I do not know how regularly your countries report, but it is a requirement you have to do every year. Are you familiar with the reporting? Do you know about the Maputo Protocol or the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa?
Can we just raise the hand?
Can you raise your hands up?
For the Maputo Protocol.
Maputo Protocol, are you aware about it? Can you raise up your hand, please? Only one person in the room? Quite a number. Are you familiar with the reporting system? Yes, there's someone there.
Thank you. Currently, what is happening in Swaziland in terms of all the legal frameworks that you have just presented, we usually have a leading ministry, that is the Deputy Prime Minister's Office and a Ministry of Justice, which usually calls us in the different ministries, and we look at our different key areas and we report, and then they finalize the report for submission. Thank you.
And sorry, from Swaziland, if I may just ask another question. Once the report is done, do you do a postmortem after?
Yes, they usually call us, and we are led by the Minister of Justice to look at what has been done.
And is there public participation?
Well, some, I know that maybe with others I may not be cognizant, but with some, for example, the children's rights, I know that there was public consultation. They called the People's Parliament, where we went to the crawl and we discussed all these frameworks. A lot of frameworks were discussed there. It was taken to parliamentarians, it was taken to different constituencies where these issues were discussed. But, well, there are instances where you find that people forget about some of these legal frameworks when they were taken to them. Yet they do call us in regions, and we come and meet, interrogate them even before the domestication and the ratifications. Thank you.
May we hear from another member in the room, especially if what you do with the concluding remarks or even comments that come from the treaty bodies, either from the African Union, even from the UN.
Thank you very much, Chair. Usually, as Swaziland has indicated, in Malawi, Rose from Malawi, what usually happens is we have the Office of the Vice President, which is dealing with issues of reforms for the nation. So what we usually do as a country, we look into the issues which are associated with our ministry. So each ministry would write something pertaining to what we are to achieve that year, which is coming either from the treaties or protocols. Now, what usually comes is we have to write back a report related to what we have achieved for that year concerning, say, a policy, for example, the issue of women. It's Minister of Education and Minister of Women Education is the Minister of Education and Minister of Gender in our country, which work into that. So mostly we write reports and they go to the president, and sometimes he sends them back if they are not very clear, depending on what we have written, because they want to know exactly what we have done in relation to such maybe issues which have been raised. So the comments, sometimes the issue which you have said about maybe the conclusions and the recommendations, Sometimes we don't really see them. Sometimes, there are times when we don't really see them, that what recommendation has come, have we done what is expected of us to do? So that's the situation. Thank you very much.
How is civil society implicated in what you just said? Malawi.
Civil society implicated? Not really. What I've just said, as Minister of Education, every year we have a joint sector review where we invite civil societies to come, even the partners, development partners, they're part of it, and we present to them what we have done. They ask us questions and we work together on such. So I think not necessarily that we, maybe I would say to some extent, maybe the civil society which we have in our country maybe do not really do what other countries are doing, in the sense that we work together with them. But if there are issues, they come to us. But there are times when we just see the issues coming in newspapers, not necessarily having a chance of discussing with the different departments and ministries and agencies. Thank you. I hope I've answered. Thank you.
Okay, I have one more question to do people engage the civil society, particularly in terms of when they develop their shadow reports to the committees? The shadow reports, usually in these treaty bodies, you have the government doing the report, but you see government can never present a picture that puts it on bad light. So some of the challenges, they'll try and a rosy picture, but the civil society will come with the other angle. You say, yes, it is true, you've implemented, but there remains this challenge, or recently you did A, B, C, D in respect of this one. So do you get your civil societies also doing shadow reports in your countries? And then once they've done the shadow reports, when the recommendations come, during the post-mortem, do you engage then the civil societies to help you with the recommendations? Because you need them. They form strategic partners for implementation at national level.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Vandana Jadua from the Ministry of Gender, Mauritius. So yes, for Mauritius, we've been signatory to various international, regional, and national instruments, and we have regular reporting system. It's done through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and of course we have consultations with various stakeholders, because most of the areas of concern relate to various sectors. So we have consultation with various stakeholders, including NGOs. And regarding the SALDO report, they have their own report. So while reporting to the Commission, they have their own report that they prepare. But in parallel, when we prepare our report prior to going to the SLO, State Law Office, we have consultation with government, plus the non-state actors, including NGOs. Thank you.
We are left with about 13 minutes. In the next 13 minutes, what I would like you to do is to write in groups, what are the challenges you face as member states, or as civil society, or as any other stakeholders in implementing the legal instruments that support the right to education for girls and young women? And what recommendations would you make to ensure that we have an implementation of those instruments that have been signed or ratified by your governments? Can I let you think about this and write it down, and then you'll give it to us?
Excuse me? Is it possible to repeat?
Yes, yes. Sorry. So let me say this again. The question that I'm posing is, what are the challenges do you face as ministry, as people from the ministries, stakeholders, other stakeholders, civil society, or other institutions like UN, what challenges do you face in implementing those legal documents, those legal instruments that have been ratified by your governments? And what are the recommendations, because there are challenges we know, what are the recommendations that you would put to ensure a more effective implementation of those legal instruments concerning the rights of girls and women to education? I hope that's clearer.
May I have your attention, please? Now, we talked about, may I have your attention? Now, we talked about challenges. I talked about the challenges and a few recommendations there, but those are just general things. But having the advantage that you've come from a country and you understand the context in which you operate and the content, it would be useful for us if just one recommendation, one concise recommendation from each table, not two, and a challenge that you think is so critical that we can take to the African Union for further action.
Hein? M'assois là-bas? Non, c'est bon ici. Je ne veux pas rentrer dans le panel. I just want to say... Oui, je voulais juste dire que pour ce qui concerne l'Union africaine, je ne suis pas très Union africaine, mais comme j'ai été là, je peux dire quelque chose par rapport à l'Union africaine. Je crois que nous avons quand même une certaine faiblesse au niveau de l'Union africaine. En principe, quand on a fait tout le processus de mise en place des conventions, des traités, des chartes, etc., idéalement, une fois que c'est adopté, retourné dans les pays, on devrait pouvoir travailler à faire le suivi et la coordination avec les pays pour nous assurer qu'ils ont fait... pour nous assurer qu'ils ont signé, ratifié et sont en train de mettre en œuvre, mais surtout qu'ils ont rendu compte et que nous, dans la coordination, on puisse porter l'information au niveau de l'Union africaine. Et je crois que cette dernière partie-là manque au niveau de l'Union africaine, on ne le fait pas. Et s'il y a quelque chose à corriger du côté de l'Union africaine, c'est de faire ce suivi-là et de s'assurer que les États renvoient les réponses et les rapports à l'Union africaine. Je crois qu'il y a un problème sérieux de coordination. On a un manque de coordination au niveau de l'Union africaine et on doit corriger ça. Je voulais donner juste un exemple. Je voulais juste donner un exemple. Je voulais juste donner un exemple sur ce qu'on avait fait, par exemple, pour la Charte africaine de la jeunesse. Quand on a envoyé la charte, elle a été adoptée, les États ont pris possession de la Charte africaine, on a essayé de mobiliser les jeunes au niveau national pour assurer les différentes étapes de signature, de ratification. Je crois qu'elle n'a pas la traduction. Is it better? OK. Donc, on a mobilisé les jeunes, les organisations de jeunes, les conseils nationaux de jeunesse, et ils ont fait le travail de terrain pour accompagner les gouvernements à la signature, leur rappeler qu'ils ont pris des engagements et signer et s'assurer que c'est ratifié. Et au fur et à mesure qu'on faisait les rappels à partir des notes verbales de l'Union africaine, les jeunes prenaient la relève au niveau national pour accompagner les ministères afin que le travail puisse se faire. Et je crois que si on avait du personnel à l'Union africaine et qu'on avait le temps de travailler convenablement, on devrait faire ce genre de suivi à chaque fois qu'il y a une convention qui sort de l'Union africaine, accompagner les États dans le processus de ratification et de mise en œuvre et de rapport. Les États ne le font pas quand il n'y a pas de suivi et de coordination. Et le suivi et la coordination relèvent essentiellement de l'Union africaine. Donc ça manque un peu.
Peut-être ce que je voudrais ajouter par rapport à ce que Dr Goussou dit, c'est que je suis d'accord que peut-être au niveau de l'Union africaine, il y a peut-être un manque de coordination, mais je pense que ce qui est important aussi, c'est que souvent quand on demande des rapports à nos États membres, les États membres ne nous envoient pas leurs rapports, ou souvent ils le font extrêmement tardivement. Donc c'est sûr qu'il y a un problème des deux côtés. Mais je pense qu'il est important aussi que quand les États membres ont signé ou ratifié les différents instruments légaux, il est important donc qu'il y ait justement un retour par rapport à ce que vous avez signé. Donc je pense que je suis d'accord qu'il y a peut-être c'est une mauvaise communication bidirectionnelle, mais quelque chose qu'on doit y réfléchir. Comment on peut mieux s'assurer par rapport au rapport de votre mise en œuvre de ces instruments légaux. Voilà. Oui, Nadège, je t'écoute.
OK, merci. Je voulais juste confirmer ce que Madame a dit tout à l'heure. Effectivement, il y a un grand problème de coordination. Je vais juste donner un exemple. Le droit de l'enfant, c'est l'UNICEF. Mais l'UNICEF a fait un suivi, par exemple, dans notre pays, jusqu'au niveau du ministère de l'Enseignement supérieur pour qu'on puisse intégrer le droit de l'enfant dans les cursus de ceux-là qui font le droit. Alors, pourquoi est-ce que l'Union africaine ne ferait pas le même travail à partir de ses bureaux de représentation au pays pour entrer, puisque nous parlons de l'éducation, faire ce travail, accompagner nos différents ministères de l'éducation pour sensibiliser pour l'implémentation de ces différentes chartes, de ces différents textes réglementaires, pour qu'ils soient aussi introduits dans les curricula des formations. Je pense qu'on aurait un meilleur résultat. Je ne sais pas si vous avez vu l'ambiance dans la salle. Quand vous posez des questions, ça veut dire que nous sommes tous presque ignorants des textes qui doivent nous aider à avancer. C'est qu'il y a un véritable problème. Peut-être que s'il y a des activités au niveau de l'Union africaine, ça s'arrête au niveau des ministères de genre, mais pour que ça arrive au ministère de l'Éducation, c'est un grand pas. Les seuls qui peuvent aider à ce que toutes les parties prenantes soient concernées, je crois que ce sont les bureaux de représentation de l'Union africaine, qui doivent être proactifs, travailler avec le gouvernement, c'est vrai, mais à travers les différents ministères. Nous sommes ici, nous représentons nos pays, nous allons rendre compte, nous allons faire un rapport, mais nous ne pouvons pas agir directement si nous n'avons pas derrière nous, par exemple, un accompagnement des bureaux au niveau de nos pays. Je crois qu'il y a lieu d'ajouter cet aspect-là. Donc c'est un défi que les bureaux, les représentations de l'Union africaine au niveau de nos pays puissent effectivement agir, entrer en action, comme on les voit avec les représentations, par exemple, de l'UNESCO, de l'UNICEF. Je crois qu'on gagnerait. Merci.
Merci. Je voudrais emboîter le même pas que ma voisine pour dire qu'il existe en Côte d'Ivoire un observatoire genre. Et il y a le ministère de la Famille, de la Femme et de la Sécurité de l'Enfant. Et pourtant, justement, ces lois, ces conventions ne sont pas régulièrement diffusées, alors que l'observatoire, j'estime que l'observatoire existe justement pour avoir un regard de coordonnateur sur l'application de toutes ces conventions que le pays ratifie. Donc, je ne sais pas, comme elle le dit, si l'Union africaine peut booster un peu. Nous allons parler, bien sûr, mais il faut que l'Union africaine booste. Nous, par exemple, dans notre ministère, on a dû faire l'audit genre. Et l'audit genre a été initié par le ministère de la Famille, de la Femme et de la Sécurité de l'Enfant. Alors que le ministère de l'Éducation nationale, normalement, qui gère ces aspects d'éducation, devrait normalement prendre sur lui de faire cet audit. Mais il a fallu que ce soit initié ailleurs parce que c'est de leur prérogative. Donc il y a vraiment effectivement ce problème de coordination entre d'abord les ministères et les structures même que le gouvernement met en place pour coordonner, avoir une vision d'ensemble de toutes ces lois que nous avons ratifiées. Merci.
Moi, ce que j'aimerais rajouter, c'est que c'est par rapport aux bureaux de représentation. En général, tous nos bureaux de représentation, pour la plupart, sont des bureaux de paix et sécurité. Alors donc, voilà, nous avons déjà un problème. Mais je reviens à deux problèmes. Et j'ai bien aimé le point de Nadège qui dit que quand on a parlé aujourd'hui, cet après-midi, on sent effectivement que c'est nouveau pour beaucoup d'entre vous. C'est un jargon qui ne vous est pas familier. Donc, je me rends compte de plus en plus l'importance d'avoir des réunions de renforcement de capacité par rapport à cette dimension de, par exemple, quelle est la différence entre un protocole, un traité, une convention. Donc, parce que ce sont des termes qui vous est complètement inconnus. Vous ne savez pas quel... Bon, bien sûr... On n'est pas des avocats, mais ce sont des termes quand même qu'il faut comprendre, qu'il faut connaître, parce que c'est nous, au niveau des ministères, qui faisons la mise en œuvre. Donc d'abord, ça c'est la première des choses. Deuxième chose, je me rends compte, et je reviens au point de Dr Agoussou, c'est vraiment cette coordination, parce que je sais que par exemple l'UNICEF, l'UNESCO, ils font énormément, ils vont jusqu'au pays, parce qu'ils ont des bureaux pays, ils ont beaucoup plus de moyens que nous, donc de faire justement ce suivi. Donc il est important
important qu'à notre niveau, qu'on ait peut-être plus comme une plateforme de coordination pour, justement, parce qu'on ne peut pas faire un travail de, si vous voulez, dédoublement, parce que, bon, ça a été déjà fait par nos confrères des Nations Unies. Donc, c'est bien qu'on puisse avoir une plateforme pour, justement, harmoniser toutes ces données et qu'on puisse aller de l'avant, parce que à la fin de la journée, ce qu'on veut, c'est que justement, c'est que ces protocoles, ces chartes, ces traités soient mis en œuvre pour justement bénéficier nos filles, mais finalement pour bénéficier le développement socio-économique de nos pays. Oui, Nicolas.
Je profite de prendre la parole puisqu'on met l'UNICEF sur un piédestal. Je crois qu'il y a 2 poids, 2 mesures. L'UNICEF, c'est un partenaire au développement qui, par définition, par harmonisation, du fait de la déclaration de Paris, du fait des déclarations successives d'harmonisation de l'aide, etc., s'aligne sur les plans sectoriels nationaux. C'est-à-dire que le dialogue, il est local, mené au niveau local, avec le leader qui est le gouvernement, et nous, on est là pour accompagner, alors effectivement pour influencer un petit peu, essayer de travailler un petit peu plus sur nos domaines de prédilection, bien évidemment, mais comme le feront bien évidemment les autres partenaires. Et ce qui fait qu'à la fin, on a un équilibre puisque chacun a ses spécificités et je dirais, ses points de convergence, notamment autour de tout ce qui est partenariat mondial pour l'éducation. Je pense que ce qu'on entend ici, finalement, c'est un déficit de communication de l'Union africaine, qui ne m'est pas, enfin, qui me fait écho personnellement, parce qu'après après presque 20 ans passés sur ces tables de coordination, etc., j'ai jamais vraiment vu le relais des messages de l'Union africaine à la table des donateurs, en éducation en tout cas. Donc peut-être qu'il y a quelque chose à faire et peut-être que ça pourrait faire partie d'un des points d'action des recommandations de cet atelier. Je vous remercie.
Malawi.
Thank you very much, Chair. From the look of things, the issue of coordination is the one which has been highlighted in here. And my question is going to my fellow member states. How many of us, when we get back home, we are going to present a report to our minister? Then the minister would take the same report to the line ministries. For example, in my country, we have got TVET under the Ministry of Labor, and we also are talking of issues of gender in this room. So how many of us are going to take such information which we have gathered from this gathering to other ministries? This is the problem. This is a problem. What usually happens is when I go attend a meeting, usually I'll do, maybe it's only my ministry which is going to benefit. As a result, other ministries would not know what maybe Article MESA or AU have discussed. So because of that, I think something has to be done, as UNICEF has indicated. As AU, you have to monitor some of the issues which we are discussing in here. Have we taken them to the rightful places so that they should be implemented as according to what we have agreed and recommended? Thank you very much, Chair.
To Ruth, maybe the last couple of words before we close. So we will take, please give us back your challenges and your recommendations. But we can see now that the discussion is getting richer. So I'll give Dr. Ruth the last word before we close.
Okay, I know the problem coordination is a big problem in many countries because ministries want to own what they're doing and they do not want to share information. Because if I am talking about gender, gender is a cross-cutting thing. So if you have relevant information that can help another ministry, I think information sharing is critical because then it builds on the bigger picture for all of us. And as you sit here, just only one request. Even if you're in TVET, even if you're in the civil society, your presence here counts. You need to take back this information to ensure that at country level, even if they're not implementing because of not knowing, you'll be their eye-opener to know what is happening and to make a difference. Because without that, we'll be will be doing an exercise in fertility. Come in 2063 for the African Union, I don't know what else we'll be reporting as key achievements for girls and women in education. Thank you.
So maybe as a last word, I think we have, as we said, a problem of communication at different levels, a problem of information sharing. And I think that it's at 3 levels. At national levels already, are you sharing the information already at your different levels, in the different ministries that you have in your own countries? Are you sharing the information at a regional level with your regional communities? And here I look at my colleagues from the regional communities who are here, SADC, ECOWAS, I think I'm not too sure who else we have, the Eastern community. How are you sharing this information with them? Because normally it is the RECs with whom you should be sharing this information, and then this information comes to us at this continental level. So this is something that which will go into our recommendations, but it is something that we will have to think of again for a better information sharing, especially on this aspect. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention, and with this we close the session for today, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Yeah. So please give all your recommendations to Dr. Agusu, who is sitting here. Thank you very much.